A new year, a new me. Does anybody still make New Year's resolutions? Mine's to try to be healthier, so I bought a gym pass with 8 classes. I didn't spring for a gym membership because, let's be realistic. But a gym pass was safe. Small baby steps towards a healthier me. That's what resolutions are about, right? Good intentions to be a better version of yourself. Do you know who else could do with a few New Year's resolutions? This country. Could 2023 be the year for a fairer, more just Malta? As anyone who's ever made a New Year's resolution knows, it starts with identifying something you want to change. A problem, a bad habit, something you want to improve on. Casual examples could be eating too much sugar, or not working out enough, cronyism, corruption, blatant disregard for planning laws, impunity for every single crime committed in office. I could go on. So you've acknowledged that you have a problem, and that's the first step, but a New Year's resolution will only work if you want to make a change. You have to remove the chocolate from your cupboards. You need to buy that gym pass. You've got to stop hiring your best friends or their children to fill positions that they are unqualified to fill. Stop giving tenders by direct orders to the likes of Keach Kembry's companies. You have to make a vow to stop meeting dodgy characters and signing backroom deals for wind farms, power stations, banks and hospitals. You have to promise that you will not give up huge tracts of public land for more fake universities. You will stop giving permits for hotels to be built on public foreshore and blocks of flats and petrol stations on ODZ land. You think about it, and you will not sign a bill that will allow you to unilaterally appoint the Standards Commissioner. It's not easy, but it's the start of the year, and you have good intentions. But it takes effort, and you will constantly need to remind yourself that it's going to be worth it, that you are worth it. Because sometimes resolutions are about changing the bigger picture. Let's talk about 3 things that this country can do with improving on. The construction industry. It's booming. But between 2019 and 2021, so just 3 years, there were reported 17 people who died on the job. Last year, 8 further people were reported to have died. The construction industry is responsible for 90% of deaths in the workplace. I mean, that's a crazy statistic. And what's being done about it? Why isn't a statistic like this being taken seriously? What are the repercussions on those careless contractors who are carrying out unsafe practices that result in the injury or death of their workers? Are these injuries and death collateral damage that the government accepts because the industry is raking in money? This week we saw how 19 years later, the family of Rita Velja, a woman buried in her own home, still have not found justice. It's not an isolated incident. Just over a month ago, 20-year-old Jean-Paul Sofia was buried at his workplace. Will an inquiry be launched into his death? And if it is, are we going to do something about it, or will we just ignore the findings? I'll mention accountability. Yesterday, the Ombudsman reported that since 2020, 35 of its reports were ignored by Parliament, the last port of call when the Ombudsman has been ignored by everyone else. 35 out of 35. What's the point of having an Ombudsman in the first place? I mean, why even bother with wasting everyone's time? Next time someone goes with a complaint, just have someone stand at the door and do this. More shocking is the trial that will continue tomorrow. Sion Grek was beaten up and stabbed 17 times and left to die in a field in 2005. Her partner and his friend were accused of the crime. It took 18 years for this murder case to get to trial. In the meantime, both Sion's parents have passed away. What sort of justice is this? Justice delayed is justice denied, and it is unacceptable. I'll move on to enforcement. Barely 2 months ago, Bernice Cassar was shot and killed outside of her workplace, with her ex-husband suspected of having committed the crime, who pleads not guilty. She was just 40 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. She had a family who adored her and 2 young children. It wasn't an isolated incident. She had followed all the right steps, reported him to the police. He had threatened her enough times and harassed her enough times that her lawyer had allegedly begged the police to do something before it became too late. They didn't. And at 8 a.m. on the 22nd of November, it became too late. Maybe the biggest resolution Malta needs is to protect its women better. What does any of this have to do with justice for Daphne? Everything. Because the root cause is the same. Corruption, impunity for crimes and harassment, a laissez-faire attitude of the prosecution and politicians all leads to the same bottom line. Shoddy standards, cut corners, and ultimately casualties. Are these events not trigger enough for our politicians to be urged to make that change? I see that recently the government has been more willing to appoint boards of inquiry, but once these reports are finalized, what's done to change the status quo? So far, nothing. Have we become the sort of country that really can't be bothered if our citizens and residents are killed as long as we're living comfortably in our own bubble? It's funny because outside of our bubble, we do seem to have a functioning moral compass. There was an outcry at how 6,500 people were killed building the Qatari stadiums for the World Cup, because people understood that progress shouldn't come at the expense of people's lives. So why doesn't this logic apply here? Malta has the potential to be a jewel. We can be a progress-driven, business-friendly country without having to sacrifice our reputation, our standards of living, our foreshore, and most importantly, our lives. But in order to do this, we need a clean-up, removing the criminal elements and the dead weight that have this country in a chokehold. If we can't do this, then stop touting Malta as a first-class destination, because this is the behavior of a banana republic, and frankly, it's embarrassing. Maybe the New Year's resolution the government can have is to try to take its job seriously, to try to take the lives of this country's inhabitants seriously. Maybe it can try to be worthy of this country and make it a place we can be proud of again. But how do you convince a government with such a strong majority to make these New Year's resolutions? More still, how do you convince them to stick to them? I think it's only with constant government scrutiny that decent standards will be maintained. So maybe the answer is that it's the citizens of this country who also need to make a few resolutions. A resolution towards working towards an effective opposition that people can rally behind. A resolution to be aware of what's happening in the country, to remain informed. To object to blatant wrongdoing when this is made public by journalists. A resolution to show up when it matters and to stand up with those who are sticking their necks on the line to improve this country. Let's remember that 3 years ago, Malta stood up to be counted, and a man who went so far as to tattoo the words Invictus on his arm, Joseph Muscat, was forced to step down as Prime Minister of the country. Together, we can make this a country worth fighting for. We can get justice for Daphne, for Bernice, for Sion, for Jean-Paul, for Rita, and the countless others who have been let down by the failure of those who have been elected to represent us. Maybe 2023 will be the year that we put on our big girl pants and get this country back on track. Thank you.